What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brandon Smith. So today's case is going to be a little shorter than my usual outputs, but the story is very near and dear to my heart. So I hope you will still give it your usual devoted attention and hopefully watch all the way through to the end. Thank you so much in advance. Let's get into it. The day is Saturday, March 16th, 1974. The song Seasons in the Sun by Canadian folk visionary Terry Jacks is #1 on the Billboard charts. The film The Exorcist, starring paranormal icon Linda Blair, is #1 at the box office in just 8 days from now. The Wolfpack of North Carolina State University will end the University of California, Los Angeles' dynastic basketball reign at 7, winning the national championship in Greensboro, North Carolina. 1,100 kilometers northwest in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, 14-year-old Karen Caughlin has spent her previous hours at a local roller rink. Recreationally exhausted, Karen is dropped off at her girlfriend's home, where she will seek respite for the morning. Caughlin will never make it into the house. This day in mystery. Friday, March 15th, 1974, in Sarnia, Ontario, is mild and temperate. With a daytime high of 6 degrees Celsius, residents of the Imperial City are treated to warmth few other Trillium Province occupants can relate to. 14-year-old Karen Caughlin has enjoyed this exclusive privilege for the entirety of her young life. Born on May 31st, 1959, Karen Leanne Caughlin is a vibrant teenage girl full of energy. In 1974, Karen lives at 171 Brock Street South with her mother, father, 3 sisters, and 2 brothers. The second youngest of the clan, Caughlin attends 9th grade at nearby Sarnia Collegiate Institute and Technical School, or as more commonly referred to by locals in the interest of saving their breath, Skits. March 15th of this year starts out like any other day. The school week is done and the weekend is upon her. Better still, March break is scheduled for next week, so the high schooler has 9 days of teenage freedom to look forward to. At 3 p.m., Karen and a female classmate walk the 8 blocks to her gal pal's home at 108 Martha Street. Here, they ditch their academic attire for a more leisurely look. For Caughlin, it's a white V-neck sweater with a tie-up in the back, a short brown jacket with gold buttons and sheepskin sleeves and collar, and a pair of GWG brand blue jeans. Red socks, Mickey Mouse wristwatch, and 3-inch platform shoes, characteristic of the decade, complete the outfit. The agenda for the night is roller skating, and at 7:30 p.m., Karen and company are picked up hitchhiking. The duo are then driven to Rose Gardens roller rink located in nearby Canatera Park, arriving at 7:45 p.m. With legendary voices like Elton John, Andy Kim, and Bachman Turner Overdrive trumpeting over the arena's loudspeakers, Caughlin spends the evening circling the skating track, laughing and dancing amongst the scores of similarly enthralled Sarnians. But the fun, as is the way, can't last forever, and at 11 p.m., Karen and her escort decide to call it a night. Caughlin has made prior arrangements to spend the evening at a different girlfriend's house. However, Karen is not expected at this appointment for a full 2 hours, so she and her pal accept a ride from 2 other teenage boys whom the pair are already familiar with. The co-ed foursome coolly cruise through the streets in the dull beige pickup truck. At 11:30 p.m., Coughlin's date to the roller rink is dropped off at her Martha Street address. At 11:45 p.m., the now trio picks up another Skits matriculate and continue the joyride. As the calendar flips to March 16th at 12:25 a.m., the quartet parks it at the local A&W restaurant to down a few hamburgers and root beers. At 12:50 a.m., Karen honors her curfew when she is dropped off at the head of the driveway of her lodging. Caughlin says her goodbyes and thanks the vehicular collective for the ride before starting the short journey to the 2-story dwelling perched at 238 Brock Street South. Karen Caughlin minimizes in the rearview mirror of the truck before finally disappearing altogether. Just before 10 a.m. on March 16, 1974, area farmer Fred Bygrove is cutting through Enniskillen Township on his way to one of the more than 60 production plants that lie just beyond the city of Sarnia, the landmarks that provide for the city's ominous nickname, Chemical Valley, when something catches his eye. An apparition markedly different than the dirty snow is visible in a shallow ditch just beyond the country thoroughfare. When Fred gets out of his vehicle for a closer inspection, he is aghast when he realizes the contrasting object is that of a female body. Face-up brunette locks swept unnaturally towards the brim of the skull, the young woman is covered with cuts and bruises and decidedly no longer alive. A substantial amount of blood surrounds the deceased. Bygrove drives to the nearest home and police are summoned to the scene. Authorities collect the body. A post-mortem exam determines that the deceased was the victim of a vicious assault. Additionally, she has sustained injuries consistent with being struck and run over by a motor vehicle. The condition of the body makes identification extremely difficult. However, one clue to the unknown female's self is the presence of a Sarnia Collegiate Institute and Technical School class ring. Students and faculty of the learning institution peruse yearbook photos. A description of the unknown female is broadcast to area radio stations. One of the households that hear this melancholy transmission is the family residing at 171 Brock Street South, who are desperately missing their daughter and sister. On March 18th, the Caughlins arrive at the Sarnia morgue, previously informed of the nameless girl's battered and broken state. Karen's parents are unable to bring themselves to look. However, upon seeing the heart-shaped birthmark on the woman's left leg, the youngest 2 Caughlin girls positively identify their sister as the deceased. With 14-year-old Karen Caughlin established as their fatality, police grimly set to work on the investigation into her death. All 3 inhabitants of the pickup truck that dropped Karen off on Brock Street are interviewed. Each provides an independently identical story. All are insistent that Caughlin was alive and well when last seen. Attendees of the roller rink, including staff, are also canvassed. Nothing beyond the norm is reported. Karen was not involved in any incidents. She had no interaction of circumstance, and by all accounts, Caughlin enjoyed only a wholesome Friday night at a roller rink. Investigators are clear that Karen has been the victim of vehicular consequence. Injuries to her right side and overlaid marks on her clothing are consistent with this form of impact. Paint remnants indicate that the decisive automobile was a color known as plum crazy. Only high-performance cars manufactured by Dodge, Chrysler, and Plymouth in 1970 and 1971 were factory sprayed in this particular tone. Authorities asked to speak to anyone in the area who drives a vehicle matching these specific attributes. No one comes forward. On March 23rd, the brown satchel-style purse Karen was last seen wearing is found at the bottom of a ravine on the southwest corner of LaSalle Line and Highway 21, 1.5 kilometers from the discovery site of Caughlin's body. Police now have two unique locations, each just as critical to their investigation. Both are over 20 kilometers from Karen's last known whereabouts, but detectives are equally stymied as to the how and why Caughlin came to be in either area and the events that resulted in her demise. The last people confirmed to have seen Karen Caughlin alive were the three people in the pickup truck that dropped her off at 238 Brock Street South on the morning of March 16th. As such, police naturally had to look at these three individuals. When interviewed, each member of the automobile's stories was succinct. Karen was dropped off just before 1 a.m. and no one interacted with Caughlin after that point. Independent sources buttress the trio's harmonized timeline. Everything regarding the story these three were telling was seemingly checking out. Additionally, authorities were in possession of evidence that Caughlin was struck by an automobile with a plum crazy finish, a color remotely far on the spectrum from the beige yellow paint job that covered the trifecta's vehicle. While police have never made any official statement ruling out the truck triplets, local wisdom is of the mind that this collective is in no way responsible for Karen Caughlin's death. The three people that remained in the pickup truck after 1 a.m. said that they saw Karen headed for the door of her friend's home, but importantly, none of them actually saw her enter the property. Coughlin's host also said that the young woman never made it into the dwelling. So what happened to prevent her ingress? Investigators had a theory. They proposed that Karen was abducted or struck by a passing motorist shortly after her friends departed the Brock Street address. There was nothing to disprove this notion, but the problem was there was nothing to prove it either. No one in the neighborhood reported hearing any sort of commotion that morning. The street was thoroughly scoured and no residue of a motor vehicle collision was found. No single mechanic came forward with evidence of damage to a car indicative of a fatal traffic accident. So, while the theory is certainly plausible, evidence to support the postulation is non-existent. Karen Caughlin was last seen alive definitively in west central Sarnia. She was found deceased in rural Enniskillen Township. Detectives knew that if they could figure out how she came to be in this location, they would solve the mystery of who killed Karen. One of the ideas they considered was that Caughlin willingly traveled to the site. Karen was a social butterfly. Many people her age are. Individuals on the cusp of teenagehood network with a wealth of different people in many different social environments. Caughlin was a freshman at Sarnia Collegiate Institute and Technical School. The institution had an enrollment of nearly 600 individuals. About 300 of them possessed a driver's license. Could Karen have prearranged a meetup with one of her mobile accredited classmates? Caughlin attended the Rose Gardens roller rink just hours before her passing. Reportedly, there was over 1,000 people in attendance on the night of March 15th. Could Karen have made après-patinage plans with one of these patrons? Police questioned all of Coughlin's teachers and nearly all of her fellow students. None reported making plans with her scheduled for that weekend. Detectives questioned many who attended the Point Edward Skating Hall on March 15th. No one acknowledged having any involvement with Karen greater than perfunctory exchanges. The friend who accompanied Caughlin to Rose Gardens was of similar testimony. She said that Karen had no marked interaction with any one individual and certainly did not discuss meeting up with anyone after their engagement. Authorities were absolutely stymied. Caughlin certainly did not travel alone to her final resting place, but how she came to perish on that lonely country road was an uncrackable conundrum. All right, so what do I think happened? The story of Karen Caughlin is an absolute tragedy, one that has haunted residents of Sarnia for a year shy of a half-century. I mentioned earlier that Karen's story is very near and dear to my heart. Allow me to explain why so now. I lived in Sarnia for 7 years. My maternal grandparents lived there for nearly their entire lives. My mom was born and raised in the city. Like Caughlin, she too is one of 6 children, 2 brothers and 3 sisters, one of whom is named Karen. The similarities are uncanny. At the time of Coughlin's passing, my mother was a senior at a rival high school. She remembers the crime well and just how much the event affected the Sarnia community. So you can see why I naturally had to pay homage to Karen Caughlin, the little girl who meant so much to so many, gone entirely too soon. Let's talk theories. I, like the locals, cannot envision a scenario in which the people who dropped Karen off killed her. The reasons are apparent and multiform. Authorities have been clear that Caughlin was struck by a car. The color of the determined imposing car is plum crazy. The pickup truck that dropped Karen off on the morning of March 16th was a dull beige. So for me to believe that the people in the truck had something to do with Coughlin's death, I would then also have to believe that a second purple-hued car was somehow involved, or that police don't know how to read a paint swatch. This is a pretty substantial supposition and flies directly in the face of the principal tenet of my channel, Occam's razor. Additionally, I can't envision 3 teenagers keeping their mouths shut about a homicide for any amount of time, let alone 49 years. Benjamin Franklin said that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. The analogy is even more frustrated when you envision that the 3 people in question are adolescents. I mean, think back to yourself as a teenager, or if you are one now, hello and thanks for watching. My channel demographics would suggest otherwise, but I digress. At this junior age, I myself was pretty incapable of keeping a secret. My friends were similarly tattletaled. Yes, I know that is not an adjective, but I'm using it anyways because it works here. And this teenage candor was implemented for anything, everything. And you could argue that if you were party to a murder, you certainly would have reason to stay silent. But the fact of the matter is, they don't know any better. The frontal lobe of the human brain, the component responsible for higher level cognition, does not fully develop until age 25. Thus, the requisite hardware to fully understand the gravitas of disclosure and self-incrimination is not present in this contingent. When you pair this paucity with the evidence, I have to believe that the pickup truck 3 were not involved in the death of Karen Caughlin. Just as a quick note here, I found it interesting that no one explored the idea that Karen did in fact go into the house and one of her friend's parents did something to her. I certainly did. Now, granted, it would still not explain the purple paint found on Coughlin's person, assuming that no one residing at 238 Brock Street South drove a plum-crazy 1970s high-performance vehicle. Maybe the police did explore this angle and just have not commented on it or ruled out the principal characters beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know, and detectives are sadly mum on the notion. I just thought I'd mention it. Anyways, next, let's talk about the random hit and run. Here, I also have reasoning issues. If we take the teenagers who dropped off Karen at their word, which you now know I do, the boys' last vision of Caughlin was her turning and headed for the house at 238 Brock Street South. Said home is no more than 6 meters from the road. I'll show you a picture. This is what it looks like. So how then could Karen have been the victim of a hit and run? Caughlin was already off the road. Additionally, wouldn't the boys have seen this collision? They had just dropped her off. The house in question is situated almost exactly in the middle of the block. The nearest perpendicular road is over 100 meters away, which, just as an aside, is the road my mom grew up on and where I lived for 5 months. Anyhow, how could you not notice a bright purple vehicle speeding past your truck and severely impacting your friend 100 meters behind you? In my mind, you couldn't. And because of this, I don't think Karen was the victim of a hit and run. I also don't believe Caughlin had made plans with a high school chum. Here's why. Karen never discussed any additional plans with her friends at school or her date to the roller rink. I would expect a 14-year-old girl would normally make a point to include this reservation into their everyday conversation because, I mean, it's exciting. I explored the idea that potentially a friend's ex-boyfriend or possibly a teacher at Karen's school told her to keep their date on the hush, but ultimately I ruled it out for one very critical reason. I myself went to a high school with just under 1,100 students, almost double the size of Sarnia Collegiate Institute of Technology. I'm so glad that's the last time I'm going to have to say that. And I can tell you, the minute that I got my driver's license, I could identify every single make and model of vehicle that my peers drove. Now, admittedly, I had no idea what automobile belonged to which faculty member at my particular high school. But you know who did? Other staff. I say all that to say this: if someone at my school drove a 1970s high-performance purple sports car, I would certainly know who. And if I didn't, a teacher definitely would. I think at skits, recognition would be the same. We know that police interviewed classmates and faculty from the school, and the vehicle in question is still being sought after. So I believe that no blue bombers were the proud owner of a crazy plum automobile. So, if not a classmate or educator, who then drove the $64,000 car? I'll tell you. On the evening of March 16th in 1974, Karen Caughlin and her friend are having the time of their life. Particularly parched from a long night of skating, Karen breaks from her friend and makes her way to the concession stand for a cup of fountain pop. Leaning against the booth, Caughlin and a shaggy-haired boy with bell-bottoms lock eyes. The older teen approaches and the two exchange pleasantries. He says that he is from out of town and not much else. However, despite the meager banter, Karen is mighty interested. But alas, Caughlin must be getting back to her friend, and besides, the music is far too loud for any semblance of genuine conversation here. No worries, however. She and the stranger make plans to meet up elsewhere at 1 a.m. to banter acquaint. Karen parts company with the teen and reconnects with her friend in the skating oval. Caughlin, now knowing that she will soon be going rogue on her prearranged plans, does not disclose her newly established engagement. As the clock strikes 12:45 a.m. on the dashboard of the pickup truck, Karen tells her teenage stewards that she must be getting to her friend's house in order to not break curfew. The kindly adolescents oblige and steer the vehicle in the direction of 238 Brock Street South. After being dropped off, Karen feigns heading for the house. When the departing pickup truck disappears from capture, Caughlin turns 180 and secretes herself in front of the looming oak in the small front yard of the two-story dwelling. Minutes later, a plum-crazy 1971 Dodge Charger pulls alongside the darkened tree. Right on time. Karen beams as she reunites with the flocculent heartthrob from the skating rink in the car's interior. Driving through the streets of Sarnia, Caughlin knows that she is doing the wrong thing, but teenage logic is limited in reason, and young love knows no inhibitions. The conversation is positively electric, and the two's connection is developing rapidly. But just outside Sarnia proper, the modern-day Romeo and Juliet have their first impasse. Driver leans in for a kiss and is soundly pushed away by the passenger. The rejection does not dissuade him, and he doubles down on the desired affection. More forceful in her discouragement this go-round, she physically expresses the sentiment by pushing back in earnest. The older teenager at the stead of the violet chariot has seriously misread the situation. Embarrassed and enraged, he lashes out at the woman to his right with a fury of blows that sends her reeling from the car. Astonished by the development, Karen fights to gain her composure as she flees the abandoned dirt road. Coughlin's strides are no match for the lanky pursuer. Quickly, he is upon her and rededicated to his abuse. The violent streak stops just as sharply as it starts when Karen stops moving. Now recognizing the severity of his ambush, the boy on the verge of adulthood considers his next move. The decision is cowardice at its absolute echelon as the teenager backs his car over the prone, never more vulnerable young woman, ensuring her death. After this, he drags the lifeless Caughlin towards the gravel shoulder as chemical residuum from the nearby power plants shrouds the full moon over the imperial city. The purple car and the yellow recreant leave town forever. The death of Karen Caughlin left the Sarnia community reeling. Her murder was actively investigated by police in the subsequent years, but despite Karen's parents' pleas to keep them abreast of their research, the grieving pair were left in the dark by authorities for nearly 3 decades. However, the silence was shattered in 2003 when the elder Coughlins received an unexpected call from the Ontario Provincial Police. Modern-day analysis revealed that a small amount of blood found at the discovery site belonged to an individual other than Karen. 2 years later, this unique sample was used to create a DNA profile. The specimen was compared against existing Canadian databases. No match was found. Disheartened by the lack of a match, but resilient all the same, Detective Inspector Chris Avery said these cases are never closed. They remain open and active until they are resolved by charge or other means. A $50,000 reward is being offered in this case. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Karen Caughlin. Please be sure to like and subscribe. As always, allow me a moment to tell you just what a spectacular individual you truly are and just how much your support means to me. Full transparency, it is often very hard for me to continue doing what I do. The subject matter I discuss is dark. The research involved is often depressing, and when you cling so desperately to positivity in your everyday life as I do, the mental depress required to create these videos affects me more than most. So when I log into my channel and am greeted by a new subscriber or read an encouraging comment, it really helps. It inspires me to persevere and continue shining a light on these cases, an illumination that is so deserved. I'm Brandon Smith, and I'll see you next time.